All right, welcome everybody to the 7th edition of Flight Club here on Google Hangouts. For the first time, we have not one, but two guests. Go ahead and introduce yourself, gentlemen.
If it wasn't a hangout when it was just the two of us, I'm not sure what we used to call it, but the days of just Scott and me, Steve, doing these videos, I think has come to an end, probably gracefully.
Jamie, it's you. You're on. This is your moment.
What's my introduction? I'm Jamie Ballman, and we're drinking Blom Brothers tonight, and excited to be able to do more of these since it's a lot easier than trying to get together.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Scott Hill, and so yeah, we're here. Jamie, take it from there. You got Blom Brothers. You've already introduced. Let's see that. Let's start with the bottle. Show us the bottle first. We're gonna start with the bourbon.
So, if you can see it, this is the bourbon. It says 10 years on the bottle. Reportedly, according to a million people online, it's 11 years. I can't verify that. Maybe someone else can, but MGP bourbon. Don't know anything about the brand. It looks like, or sounds like Scott did a little research on them, but not much to say other than that.
So the things I know, first, it's not our bourbon, just like it sounds, not our bourbon. They say that with a bit of pride. They freely admit it's MGP. It's not their distillation. It looks like they've been around for maybe 4 or 5 years, 3-4 years in Galena, Illinois, a small distillery that does bourbons and gins and vodkas and all the other kind of standard fare. And this is their MGP distillate that it sounds like they bring in to Illinois and age it for an additional period of time, suggested maybe another year, maybe a little bit longer in Illinois. So that's their kind of claim. Their little spin on MGP is that they age it for a bit longer there in Galena, Illinois. So what do we know about, what's our other bottle we're having here, Jamie?
The other one is the Blom Brothers Not a Rye. One of our fellow members, Eric, was able to grab a couple bottles of it, and he gave one to, or sold one to me. It's 5 years, 3 months, 12 days. It's Elixir Spirits parking lot pick. I don't know even where Elixir Spirits is, but it's also MGP rye. I know the bourbons have been out for a little bit longer. I think these are relatively new. And yeah, that's all I know about it.
Yeah, I don't think their distribution is very big yet. I think it's probably in the Illinois area and surrounding states. And if memory serves me right, that's where Eric got it, was somewhere around there. Was that a Benny's pick?
Elixir Spirits.
Okay, that's right. All right, so both.
I'm guessing their distribution will never be very big at the point that, you know, MGP stocks are running relatively low these days of their aged stuff. So,
well, they've got their own juice ready, and they've actually got their own straight bourbon that's been released. I don't know how long ago, but I believe it was like a 3-year bourbon, and they intend, I think, to just use this MGP kind of to hold them over until they really get up and running with their own spirits. Who knows how much longer it'll last beyond that. Is the rye is also MGP? Does it say that on the bottle?
Yeah, it does say Indiana on it.
So what do we know about MGP? This is the first time, at least here on Hangouts, we've talked about MGP, and we've not spent a lot of time on our blog on reviewing MGP products, or at least talking about MGP background. Netherton, you've been quiet over there. Do you know anything about MGP? If not, just say so.
Here's the thing about MGP, is that Midwest Grain Products, they are actually headquartered in Atchison, Kansas. Corporate headquarters are located there. To the extent that they distill anything in Kansas, it would be only used for ethanol, not for drinking purposes. Maybe unless you're an Atchison native. But their operation is actually really in Indiana. That's where they distill a lot of bourbon. They distill a lot of rye. They age it there. within their bourbons and their ryes, there are more than one mash bill that are used. But when there is going to be a fancy label on a bottle and a story that accompanies it that goes something like this: pre-prohibition distillery with long history, gets shut down for a certain period of time, and then so-and-so's great-grandson finds the fabled family recipe in the family cemetery somewhere and has resurrected it, and now they've handcrafted this product and are bringing it to you. What that actually means is it's a company that is trying to piggyback on the current whiskey boom, and they buy their stuff from MGP. Maybe it's even aged at MGP. They put it in a bottle, slap their label on it, and then they sell it.
Maybe add some additives and call it Templeton.
Right. Yeah. So that happens a lot, and MGP's kind of just been fine with that. So a couple of interesting offshoots have emerged from that. Number one is there is a camp that is probably down on MGP, thinking that, well, they've been duped into buying these products from these companies that don't really distill it themselves, and so there's almost like this lower grade given to MGP because of that. And then there's everyone else that realizes, no, MGP makes really, really good stuff, and just because you may not like the marketing practices of some of these other independent bottlers, so to speak, that shouldn't be a knock on MGP and the product that they actually put out. I think that that's where the trend is more leaning now, thanks to companies like High West and some others that are more transparent about where they get their stuff from and have done a good job with their public relations. So then that enables, I think, places like Blom to come through and say, hey, this is where we get our stuff from. If you really know anything about MGP and their quality products, we know that you're going to enjoy this. And I think they benefited from that.
Well, yeah, they benefited that, and there's starting to be some brand recognition for MGP themselves, and they're starting to come out with kind of for the first time in my memory or ever, their own bourbon products. What do we had? Rossville, I think, has been one of their newer releases of bourbons, which is actually the distillery started in the 1840s or 1850s as the Rossville Distillery. Netherton, you've had another one fairly recently from MGP. What was it?
The Remus.
Remus, that's right.
Yeah, the George Remus.
Remus Reserve.
Right. Yeah. So the Remus is it's an MGP owned brand. So instead of it being an independent company that sources their whiskey from MGP, MGP actually owns the brand Remus, and that brand makes it sound like it's more of a Cincinnati operation named after a scoundrel named George Remus.
And Remus was, I believe, Remus did source from MGP, and then when MGP decided that they're going to start putting out some of their own stuff, they purchased. That's one of the labels that they purchased.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it used to be independent, yeah, and now under MGP ownership. Yeah, that's correct.
Is the Rossville, is it rye or is it bourbon? Or is
it's rye. I wasn't gonna correct you, but it's rye.
It is rye. Okay. I know it's recently hit the shelves. I haven't had any of it yet, so.
Yeah, the Rossville barrel proof rye is terrific.
And
right.
so,
anything else on
MGP?
What's that?
I said anything else about MGP? Kind of, they used to be LDI, I believe, Lawrenceburg Distillers, and before that, it was the Seagram's plant.
Yeah, it was Seagram's for a long time, and I think Diageo had a stake in it at one point, and LDI, MGP. I'm not sure the differentiation between those two companies, if there really is any, but they've kind of taken with it and run with it in the past few years.
And the other thing, if people become interested in MGP, some of the bloggers, somebody has made a list. I believe maybe it's Skew or one of those guys. If you Google it and want to know who makes what products contain MGP, there's a list of about 50 or 100 or more that somebody has compiled that's been affirmed.
And I think it's ever growing too, especially with some of the young distilleries out there. Are we there?
Do we know for this Blom? I know you said the ages, but do we know, like for the bourbon, which of MGP's mash bills that it uses?
My research says no. They don't disclose the mash bill, and I don't know if it says anything different on the bottle, but I couldn't find anything that disclosed which mash bill. Although there were suspicions that it was one of the higher rye bourbon mash bills.
Okay.
For something this age, would it be either their high rye or higher rye?
Yeah.
They do have like 5 or 6 new ones that are of age currently that I think they've started releasing. Some high wheat ones and stuff that eventually, when they get a little more age, will be exciting to try. But I think Redemption's maybe currently bottling some of the wheat from Indiana.
Well, you can smell it's a high rye. I mean, immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. Let's get into the bourbon here. So, Netherton, you've started off there. You've got some notes already.
Yeah, I'm getting that the rye spice and a little bit of clove intermingled with those kind of classic bourbon backbone of the caramel and vanilla flavors, but the rye component jumps out of the glass, which I think is a really, really nice attribute to this. It's not just simply that corn syrupy sweetness that you might pick up on initially, and that just seems to overwhelm the whole thing. Now, this is a lot more going on.
Yeah, definitely some rye spice, the clove. I get some allspice and cinnamon too. I mean, there's quite a bit of baking spice on this, with maybe even a little bit of brown
you could
sugar
mistake this
and
easily
butterscotch.
for a barely legal rye.
Yeah.
I actually opened mine up at 8:50, so mine's been open for over close to 30 minutes now, and I took some initial notes, and I think what you're calling clove, I called sage, but oak and caramel, and at one point I was getting some dank, damp wood, just like some wet oak maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is kind of a mixture of oak notes there on the nose. To some extent, I think with the baking spices, I'm getting a little bit of dry oak, and then a little bit deeper into the nose with some of the sugars and the caramels and the brown sugars. I am getting a little bit of that kind of the dank, kind of wet wood that you're talking about.
And it is cast strength, 118.7 proof. I think we can guess that it was probably lower Rick House's. That's not as low as some of their stuff. I think I have a Smooth Ambler that's like 44, 45% cask strength, which has a lot of that wet leaf taste on it and smell on it. But
yeah, this has a wet leaves kind of smell, like after it's like a heavy fall rain. But it doesn't have quite that almost cedar kind of smell to it that some of those Old Scout single barrels do. I don't know, this doesn't leap out of the glass to me like the Smooth Ambler single barrel picks that come from MGP. This is different than that. It's a different profile.
Jamie, yours has been open for a little bit longer. Are you getting any of those like kind of tropical fruit notes that develop a little bit in the glass? I'm getting just a very faint tropical fruit in that background.
I get a little bit of cherry, but just loads of caramel and vanilla, and like you said, some cinnamon.
What was the proof on this again? 118?
118.7.
And I don't get much burn, even though I just poured this not probably 10, 15 minutes ago. There's very little ethanol, acetone, none of that alcohol burn on the nose at all. All right, let's get into it.
That rye just continues to lead the way. I mean, it's more of this, where it leapt out of the glass when you smelled it, it just kind of explodes initially into a lot of the baking spice rack right up front, which again, I just think is terrific.
I get some cherry and maybe some other kind of stone fruit on the palate. I get a little of that kind of stemmy, pitty woodiness in there as well. There's a lot more heat on this on the palate than there was on the nose, so you kind of got to sort through it a little bit more than you did on the nose.
And even into the finish, the heat does transition through.
It definitely drinks hotter than your typical cask strength MGP. I still get some of that dank, damp wood on the palate that I was getting on the nose. Other than that, I mean, it's a good solid bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would drink. It's not very oily. The mouthfeel isn't bad. It's more on the creamy side than the oily side for me. And for 118 proof cask strength, it's not still quite as creamy or oily as I would like it to be. A little bit lighter on the mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not drying, nor is it tannic. But yeah, it doesn't have that real mouth coating. And part of that, it seems to be, it's because it's like you could picture it almost as like sparks going off with all that spice mixed in with the ethanol, right at the beginning of the palate. And so it kind of dances around rather than really like coating everything over like some of those really oily bourbons do.
Yeah, salt, pepper, clove on the palate too.
Oh yeah.
It really hits hot right at the front of it. Like you said, the sparks, it's
so it's such a strong rye character to it.
Yeah, even throughout the finish, that rye really just takes over. I keep searching for some more of that fruit flavor in there, that, as I described, that cherry or stone fruit. There's a little bit in there. I'm getting a little bit of light apple, kind of hints of that tropical fruit, but those are really subtle in favor of the brown sugar and the baking and rye spice throughout the finish.
I think I get a little bit of, and I think it almost would help if it was a bit more pronounced. But on the finish, I'm searching for what I think is almost like a little bit of lemon juice. Like there's a little bit of a citrus note there. Not quite enough to kind of. Sorry.
When the heat dies off, when you can finally taste it.
Right. Yes. It seems like there's something, and it's more lemon than lime, and I don't think it's orange or grape, but there's some kind of citrus note in there.
See, I think that's what I'm getting is the pineapple on the tropical fruit, maybe some pineapple. I think what you're getting is that lemon juice.
Yeah, because it's not like it brings its own sweetness. I don't think that's really coming through. But there is something there that's a little bit different. Can't quite put your finger on it because it's not as pronounced, and those other flavors are just so dominant.
I get the dominant note of cinnamon, but not cinnamon like cinnamon powder, but like a red hot cinnamon. And
like the highly processed cinnamon sugar. Yeah.
Let's go through. Let's kind of go back through one more time, and let's add some scores to it, starting with the nose. Stephen, you usually lead us off here on your scores. What do you think on the nose?
On the nose, I really liked how it leaps out of the glass with some of those rye spice notes that aren't shrouded by the ethanol. I mean, you can tell there's some of the bourbon notes there too, but I don't know, having such a strong rye characteristic on the nose to me is kind of nice. Being able to pick that up. I put a 3.5 on the nose on this one. I like it. Yeah,
I'm happy with the nose. It's not overly sweet. It's not burning. It's got a nice age character to it. It's nothing that completely wows me, but there's nothing in here to really disappoint either. So I'd agree with the 3.5.
I'd almost go a touch higher, but no, I mean I'm in between 3.5 and 4. I really like the nose, and it's definitely the best part of it.
Sorry, I keep somehow getting to my screensaver.
Well, we're still here. We can see you.
That's not happening for. All right, no, yeah, it's Jamie. You're the curse, maybe. That's what's going on here.
It always complicates things when you bring in a third person, doesn't it?
Score the palette there, Nether.
I'm squarely in the 3 camp on the palate because I like the rye characteristic to this. I like those notes, but it seems like in addition to how the heat gets turned up a little bit, I can't go down into the layers like I like to on the palate and explore each of them with each sip and try to focus on one thing or another, because that rye spice mixed with the heat from the alcohol, it really is the only thing that you can end up going back to again and again, no matter how much I keep searching for something else. I like it enough that I'm still at a 3, but I just can't go higher than that for that reason. It needs more dimensions.
Jamie?
I'm in the same boat. It's a 3, which is kind of almost sad because on another night when I was drinking other things before it definitely scored a lot higher. I was drinking 90 or 85 proof earlier. Wasn't really after anything barrel strength tonight, and then we were doing this review, and it really is burning more than I expected. It is hard to get those notes that on another occasion it was a lot more complex. So I'd call it a 3 tonight. Don't know if that's what it ranks or if that's an off palate night, but yeah.
I'm there. I'm toying between that 3 and a 3.5. I do like the nose a little bit better, but I really enjoy the palate on this. It's not overly sweet, and that's been sort of my preference lately. So from that standpoint, it brings a lot of the character in with the rye spice and the baking spices and the various wood notes that we talked about. So I think there are some layers to it, not quite as many as I would like, and I could see this being better. I'm not offended by a 3, but I'm there between a 3 and a 3.5. And finish, Netherton.
The finish, I think sometimes I get tempted to knock down the finish a little bit if it doesn't bring something additional to the table that the nose and palate didn't already cover, which is a little bit unfair to the finish. It doesn't need to do that necessarily. On this one, I'm going to resist the temptation to do that. Because really there's not much more I get out of the finish that I don't get from the palate. And the finish's duration is long enough that it's not like I'm abruptly coming to a conclusion that I wasn't quite ready for. We were trying to search for some of those tropical fruit notes. So, I mean, there's something more there that's interesting to kind of think about with the finish. So I think I arrive at the 3 score again.
Jamie?
I'd bump the palate closer to 3.5. In between 3 and 3.5. The finish is better than the palate for me. It starts out so hot, and once it finally cools down, you can really start tasting some of those notes that are further in there. But it is long. It's medium. It's certainly not a fall off finish. So yeah, 3.5 probably.
Yeah, I'm probably down on the 3. I commented earlier that it's not oily on the palate as I would like, and I think that carries through to the finish. Is really the drawback for me on the finish. I'm left with a little bit of a dry feeling in my mouth. It's not a drying finish at all. It's not a drying bourbon, but it's kind of left with this kind of odd mouth coating feel when you're all done, kind of almost like a kind of a dry chocolate, but not really bitter chocolate. I'm left with that. I'd rather have something a little bit oily, on a finish. It would help the finish carry out a little bit longer, would bring some additional quality to it. I'm probably at a 3 on the finish. Which brings us to overall scores. Not mathematical, so go with what you want here on the overall score.
For the overall score for me, I think that I would end up actually going up to a 3.5. And even though 2 out of the 3 previous scores were a 3, I get to the 3.5 because overall, my lasting impression from this is that's one of the higher rye bourbons where I enjoyed getting a higher rye. And sometimes we'll talk about, oh, this is supposed to be a high rye bourbon, but really, if you're talking about something like Buffalo Trace Mash Bill #2, you're not talking about high rye at all. Not even close. So I like that this delivers a high rye bourbon for me, and so I'm more than just satisfied. It's a half score above that when I think about the whole experience. So I'd give it a 3.5 overall.
Jamie?
I'd say 3.5 too. It doesn't quite reach 4. Some of its parts are better than the individual components. It's satisfying. Not much more to say other than that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on a 3.5, which is a good score. It's something that we're all happy with, and I think we'd like to go back to. So it's a solid 3.5 is great. Value. Jamie, do you have any idea of sort of what the price is on this?
I want to say they're 90. Yeah, they're 90 plus tax. So the value's a little bit of a tough one, but in today's MGP bourbons, 10-year age, cask strength, it's tough to comment on it. It's a little disappointing for 90.
Well, but the 90, I mean, you're starting to talk about the new norm. Maybe they beat everybody else to that, not sub $70 cask strength, 10+ year punch, but everyone's headed that direction. And it's for me, it's priced where I would expect this to be. 10-year, 11-year cask strength, finished in Galena, Illinois for an additional year. I expect this to be in the $80, $90 range, and I'm a lot happier with this in that range than a lot of the other products that I've seen that are in that price range but much younger.
Yeah, I end up really showing my frugal and fiscally conservative colors when it comes to the value score. To me, some of the standard bearers for value include things like Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and if I can go pick that up for $59, and this is putting another $30 dent in your wallet beyond that, I'm not sure. So for me, I think at like a 2.5 on the value on this.
I can live with that. It's not a 2. It's not something I'm going to go buy every day as a 3. It's not an Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, which to me is a great value, 4.5 kind of value. So it's not bad. 2.5 is not bad.
I'd typically call it a 3. I'd say 2.5 only because I have enough MGP bourbon and I've bought it back when it was actually priced, 40 or 45 for the same product in the Smooth Ambler label. And it's definitely not a 3.
Careful about going on the record saying you have enough of anything, Jamie.
I have enough.
I'll cut that part out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. This can be used against you. We didn't read you your rights before we started.
All right, let's move over. Parting thoughts here on the Blom Brothers Nodder Bourbon, Old Fangled Nodder Bourbon.
I like the name. I think the Nodder Bourbon's cute in a good way, and I think they pick some good stuff. And I like sometimes when there's a product where I'm like, you know what, it's a high rye bourbon. I can say something like 4 Roses, B, recipe, and then you could say, now, here's another one that exhibits that. And so that's what I would walk away from this feeling like.
Jamie, anything else?
I'd walk away saying, for anyone watching the actual video, if you're curious about the MGP stuff, pick one up. There's not much in that price point. There's just not much 10-year cast strength MGP stuff left. It gets bought up very quickly. Even this Blom Brothers stuff, they're going to sell out of it within the next couple months. I can guarantee it. The OKIs, all that stuff, as soon as it becomes known, it's gone. It's off the shelves. One of the only other remaining ones that I can think of that is readily available would be like the Redemption 10, 9, 8-year stuff. So if you're curious about it, grab one. I'm not disappointed, so I wouldn't think you'd be either.
Yeah, I think you're right. This may be sort of a good thing coming to an end, so pick it up while you can. All right, let's move on to the rye, and we'll get right into it. We've kind of already introduced it, so we'll kind of get into the nose. My initial note. What's that?
I said the nose, which is tremendous.
Yeah. My initial note is it's got like a kind of iced tea kind of note to it. Very kind of creamy. They got a lot of tea flavors. And I thought the other one nosed under proof. I think this one noses way under proof.
Oh, way under proof. I mean, this is like rose petals too. I get a lot of that floral influence here, and then some of the softer herbs, not like the spicy kind of rye that you were getting from the bourbon. This has just a really nice soft herbal and then floral nose to it. This is a delightful nose. So
this is the other one. I opened this at 850 as well, and when I initially opened it, it had a bit of a sharp rye bite because I nosed it right away and jotted down a couple notes and figured I'd give it some time. I initially got peppermint, loads of peppermint on it, and it quickly all dissipated, and then I was getting like a milk chocolate, real sweet.
Yeah, I get the milk chocolate too.
But now that you were talking about the floral, the rose petals and stuff, they're really pronounced. Great nose.
This is a really inviting nose, an inviting nose in the way that some maybe like a Highland Scotch might be. It really draws you in with some delicate notes there that you can really spend some time nosing without just singeing your nostrils because of the wafts of ethanol. What did you say the proof was on this again?
It's actually higher. It's 123.8.
That is astounding.
Yeah, you're right on with those flavors. I get that peppermint, especially if you don't nose it too deep. You kind of hold your nose away from it. I think that peppermint becomes a little bit more bright. And then that milk chocolate, I'm kind of getting almost like a milk dud kind of milk chocolate there. Not a milk dud, like a milk a malt ball kind of chocolate in the background.
Yes,
I really like this nose.
It's got a uniqueness to it. It's a great nose.
I think those tea flavors tied kind of with that peppermint.
Yeah.
Almost like a ginger lemon tea.
My take on this nose, and this isn't intended to be directed at our capabilities. This is like, to me, this is like kind of a connoisseur's nose. If you were new to bourbon or rye, I'm not sure what it is on this. This isn't what I think someone who's new might enjoy, but someone who can kind of pick out some of these really incredibly unique flavors on the nose, I think would really enjoy this.
Would you identify this as a rye from the nose if you did it blind?
Initially, yes.
Just because I'm pulling out that peppermint, I think I would have to. I mean, there is that floral element there to it. but it's got some unique flavors, even for a rye that I'd kind of be questioning.
Yeah, it would give me pause, and the reason I say that is because a lot of times, you'll go into something and you expect a certain impression, and it's really refreshing sometimes when you get something that throws a change of pace at you.
I'm a little bit afraid to taste this. I'm enjoying the nose so much. I'm afraid I'm going to be let down with the palate.
You're right. We should stop.
Cut the video.
There comes the spice, and
that peppermint hits right away.
Yeah.
In a not offensive toothpaste-like kind of fashion. Just very mouth coating on the palate. More chocolate, vanillas.
A lot of those typical 95.5 MGP notes for that dill, but it's not so much dill as more the peppermint. It's not as pronounced of that dill pickle as what most of them are. It has a lot of vanilla.
That dill for me comes in a little bit more on the finish, as sort of the peppermint dissipates. And then I'm not trying to get into the finish, but there's a kind of a burning feel right after you swallow, right on the tip of the tongue, that I get there in the finish. So where that dill comes in.
I get a lot of that ginger tea.
It's really sharp right when you swallow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like a flash of the flavor.
Ginger's good. Ginger and dill, there on that end palate finish is really good.
Yeah, it's kind of unique the whole way through. This one, like what you were saying, Jamie, about the dill flavors that are typically known for things like that High West Double Rye and some of those other MGP ryes that are out there, where you're like, oh, I know what this is right away. If you're someone that likes dill, I do. That's nice. This one, it's there, but as like
it's more polished.
In a supporting character role. It's definitely not the lead.
It's not a Dickel rye. It's not a bullet rye where it's just nothing but that sharp dill pickle. That it's just, yeah.
There's some sweetness to the palate that wasn't even there on the high rye bourbon. I'm getting like cake frosting kind of notes on the palate. I mean, now they're definitely accentuated by that peppermint flavor. They're hotter, but there is sort of that creamy kind of frosting flavor on the palate that gives it some nice balance with some of the spice and the sweetness.
Yeah, I get kind of some lemon drop, cough drop. It's, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but
it is a hard one to figure out. It's smooth and then sharp and then smooth again.
I know. I think my last three sips,
is a really good description.
My last 3 sips, I've kind of gotten 3 different experiences. Even
that cough drop that you were just describing, it's like almost like one's in your mouth, and you breathe in, and it lights up your taste buds.
But it's not medicinal. I mean, if it's a cough drop, it's more just of a.
Well, I don't buy the mint cough drops.
Yeah. Let's give this some scores.
Yeah.
Jamie, let's start with you here for the nose.
I'd call the nose a 4.5. If you're ranking against other rye noses, it just has a lot going on for it. A a lot of them are so one-dimensional, and this thing has a lot of different notes, which is exciting and fun to smell. You know, like you said, you almost don't want to drink it. It smells so good.
I think I'd probably be more in the 4 range than quite a 4.5. There's some very unique flavors on it, but there's some things in here that maybe are a bit lacking for me to get that quite that high. I don't get a whole lot of age indication on this. I think there could be some more complexity added to even this very complex nose to get to a 4.5. I really like it, but I'm about a 4 on it.
I'm a 4. Yeah, it's a pleasant surprise in its uniqueness. I think it's executed well. Yeah, I'm more than satisfied with the nose on that one.
Palate, Jamie, lead it away.
I wouldn't go 4.5 on it, but I would go 4. Again, I'm comparing it to other ryes, and there's just not very many ryes that are as exciting as that. It reminds me a lot of the Thomas Handy, but different. I guess the MGP version of Thomas Handy. It's that younger, what I say, 5 year, 3 months. Those Handies are usually a little bit younger, and there's a lot of exciting stuff that happens at that age. In this bottle in particular, like I said, I'd be at a 4.
I think the palate for me is my favorite part. I'm, again, a solid 4 on this, but I'm really happy with this palate. I really enjoy it.
I'm a 3.5 on the palate, while partially admitting that all the really bright flavors that I get on there, I think that they're well done. They're interesting. That's not usually the flavor profile that I'm searching for. So I'm really showing my subjectivity here. But I just can't deny that it's good. So I'd have to give it a 3.5.
And finish, Jamie.
I'd stick with a 4 on it. I think it's a nice long finish. It doesn't drop off. It lingers. There's nothing off-putting about it. It's in the I'd take a couple more bottles of it category.
I'm going to go down to a 3.5 on the finish. The more I sip on this, and this may be for some people, which you guys may rank it higher, there's a lot of really strong herbal spices that I think hit there on the very tail end that I maybe wasn't quite getting earlier. There's a little bit of that anise, maybe fennel kind of flavor that I'm getting on that tail end that lingers around with me a little too much. Anise is not a flavor that I really like, at least not in a lingering, that's all that sticks around kind of way. Honestly, there's a little bit of this that reminds me of like taking a shot of Jaeger that just lingers around a little bit too much. I really enjoy the finish, but I kind of left with that thought in the back of my head, so I'm kind of down to a 3.5.
I'd go with a 3 on the finish. It delivers a lot of the same experience I get from the palate, but just I don't enjoy it quite as much. And there's a little bit of like especially towards the back of my palate, like there's a numbing effect that I get. I don't know, I'm getting really nitpicky here, but the end result for me is still a satisfying finish. So I just rest on a 3.
Overall score. Jamie, I'll let you take it off there.
I'd call it a 4 overall, which is probably lower than I feel like I should. And that's just being subjective on it. I really like MGP rye and always have, and I have a lot of bottles of MGP rye. So for me, I would typically rate it higher, but I'd say a 4. There's just not much that's going to taste like that. It's exciting. I don't think it's what someone's going to call the best rye there is, but for me, it is a really exciting rye.
I'm I'm a 4 with it as well. Overall, I'm really happy with it. I'm going to be hard pressed not to search out a bottle for this. I really like it. I think it would be a nice addition to some of the ryes that I already have. And like you said, Jamie, there's just not a whole lot else out there that have some of these same flavors in it. I really enjoy it. I would definitely have it again if offered. 4 for me.
I think I landed a 3.5 on this. And again, it just inserts my subjective preferences to it, with not one that's in search of the really bright flavor profile. But you know, I can't deny that it's unique, and it does a good job at what it sets out to do in that regard. And so it's not a reluctant 3.5. But I can see how other people would score it more, especially if they really like that bright flavor profile.
Which I think now leaves us at value. Jamie, another $90 bottle?
No, I think it was 60 or 65. I should know, but for once I don't. Again, Eric picked it up for me, so.
Yeah, so I think it's good range. Just assume 60 to 65 here. Jamie, I'm going to assume you're going to rank this one pretty high.
Value wise, yeah, I'd call it a 4.5. I mean, the only thing I could compare it to would be Thomas Handy, and you will never find a Thomas Handy less than 99. Maybe if you've got some really good friends, but I'd put it side by side with that any day.
I'm a little bit torn on value because I know how good a value MGP ryes have historically been. This does get into that age of 5 to 6 years, which is not the bulk of MGP ryes out there, but high proof MGP ryes are pretty common, and some of them are pretty affordable. So I'm a little bit torn with that, but at $60, $65 for a 5.5-year-old MGP rye that tastes like this, I'm very happy with the value on this. Like I said, I'd probably search out another bottle. So I'm probably in the 3.5 to 4 range on that value.
Yeah, I put the value on this at a 3.5. You know, I liken it to the good value I think something like Pikesville rye is, or maybe closer to when, you know, it debuted, which I think was when it was a little bit better than it is now. So at that price range, I think that's definitely very good. But I also need to point out that if you want to get Thomas H. Handy for less than $99, it's not knowing good friends. It's being a good friend that is going to help you.
That's a good comparison, though, I'm going to ignore that. Good comparison, though, on Pikesville. Let's talk about other $60, $65, 114 plus proof ryes out there on the market. Where does that land? Pikesville, what else is out there?
What proof is Russell's rye? They're single barrel.
104. And it's 60.
I mean, that'd be one of the only ones I can think of. You got the Knob Creek rye.
Yeah, and it's 115, and it's cheaper. I mean, so it's in typical Knob Creek fashion. It's a great bargain out there.
What were the ages on those? You did the pick.
So we're about 6.5 years on the one we picked.
So it's even
but
older.
They're anywhere from 5 to 7.5 years.
But it doesn't taste anything like this.
This is pretty incredible, and some pretty unique flavors out there. I mean, I just don't think there's a whole lot out there like this. So, you know, kind of our value scores aside, if our notes are something that interests you, you just don't have a whole lot of other choices out there.
Yeah, this is one that I think is good to help exhibit the versatility of the rye grain. Bourbon, and thereby corn, can sometimes be a little bit predictable. Rye, I mean, you've got your dill bombs that you get from MGP that places like High West will get, or you've got your rye from some place like Heaven Hill with their Pikesville, where you're like, is this just a really spicy bourbon? What's going on here? To something like this, where you're exploring some of those floral and tea notes. That Knob Creek rye that we've got at Tom's right now, that's like a peppermint patty, a cookie. There's so much versatility, and so it's fun to have, like, this is my rye that does this for me, and this is my rye that checks this box for me. And so I think this is one to add to the shelf, to have another box that you can say it checks, to show off the versatility of the rye.
That's a good kind of closing observation on the rye. Jamie, do you have anything to kind of close with on this rye?
No, you were talking about the other ones in this range. The only other MGP rye I can think of that you could still find on the shelves if you're not in Kansas would be like the Redemption ryes. They have a 7, 8, 9, and even a 10-year. I think the 10 years probably around $100. I've picked up the 7 for as low as $60. I'd put them head to head with this, and maybe even call them better. So if our notes for this have encouraged you to go seek it out, the Redemption ryes are very good. Sweeter, more caramel notes than where this is a little more spicy. Other than that, no.
All right. Any other closing observations on the bourbon versus the rye or Blom Brothers?
Say they did good.
I think they're picking some good barrels out there. For me, it looks like they're being pretty selective and have pretty decent palates. So I'm excited to see what they're able to produce themselves, given enough time to work with. Jamie, anything?
No, they're doing well. I'd be interested to know how long they had their barrels. With MGP's availability dying off, it's the people that do have it. I'd be curious to know how they came upon their stock that they got, whether they third partied through somebody that had a bunch of it, kind of like Mike Drop did, or where they sourced it from. So no, other than that, just curiosity, I guess, more in the Blom Brothers than any other information.
All right. Netherton, you always have something to take us out with.
Well, the Blom Brothers, they are obviously descendants from Hezekiah Blom, who opened his distillery before Prohibition and was the first one to infuse his rye whiskey with rose petals. And it's nice to see the Blom Brothers carry on that tradition now through the barrels that they select from MGP.
I'm going to have to figure out on my YouTube editor how to put a disclaimer on the bottom of the screen to not believe anything that Netherton says. So if I can't figure that out, here's the disclaimer.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen. With that, we'll sign off. Check out the full review if you're not already there at flightclubict.com. And signing off, gentlemen.
Good night.
Night.